Hey y'all, Rick Sky here. Welcome back to another Timepieces for Tomorrow video. And within this video I want to talk about three very popular wristwatch brands, and those brands are Rolex, Omega, and Tudor. Now we're going to look at several popular examples from these brands up close, but I want to talk about a few things real quickly first. So Rolex and Tudor, they're both part of what's referred to as the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. So when Mr. Wilsdorf, Hans Wilsdorf, when he created Tudor, and not to misquote Mr. Wilsdorf, but essentially he was saying it was a more price accessible Rolex. A lot of people, and unfortunately Tudor, at least temporarily, had the stigma poor man's Rolex. But today's Tudor is not yesterday's Tudor, and I'm going to explain why and show you why within this video. So either of these three brands are excellent decisions. Either of these three brands, if you select among the core references, they will likely, nothing's guaranteed, but they will likely continue to appreciate over time. And a lot of that is linked to the fact that all three of these brands, they typically have price increases annually. Sometimes those price increases aren't across the board, sometimes they are, but that helps to enhance the possibility of future appreciation. And I'm not saying that wristwatches are investments. Some people think they are. I'm saying that if you want to purchase something, Rolex, Tudor, or Omega, and you want something that potentially may increase in value, that enhances the comfort level when making the purchase. Because if you become bored with a watch, you can typically always trade out of it. And in the case of Rolex especially, you might be able to trade out of it for more than you paid for it when you acquired it several years prior. Again, nothing is guaranteed, but that's a possibility. But let's look at these three popular wristwatches up close, and I'm going to showcase the Rolex Submariner, which is arguably the most iconic wristwatch in the world, and then also the Omega SeaMaster 300M, which is arguably Omega's most popular wristwatch. And then from Tudor, one that I like, and it's my favorite, may not be your favorite, but the Black Bay 58 in navy, because I feel that Tudor, and we're going to show you up close and I'm going to talk through it, but Tudor has really nailed it with the case size and the overall aesthetic of the Tudor Black Bay 58. Okay, so these are the references that I would probably, well, not probably, but yes, I would actually gravitate towards these. So on the Omega front, this right here is the Omega SeaMaster 300M, and they call this the blue wave dial because if you got 4K, crank up your resolution and see the dial, it's got a wave pattern. Now this is pre-coaxial. This is one of the older Omega SeaMaster 300M references. Now it is automatic. A similar reference came in quartz. I would stay away from quartz. You don't want quartz, you want automatic, or you want manual wind. That's just my opinion. If you feel differently, comment below and tell me why I'm wrong. But one thing I did do, you can see I put it on this rubber strap. If you're going for current reference Omega SeaMaster 300M, you're probably going to find that you don't like the bracelet. And if you do like the bracelet, it's probably because you have not tried on a Tudor or a Rolex. Because if you try those on, the bracelets taper. If you try on an Omega SeaMaster 300M with a stainless bracelet, you're probably going to feel that something is off if you've tried on if you've tried on Rolex and Tudor first. And for that reason, if I was going Omega today, I would go Omega, always buy it on the bracelet, but add a rubber strap. This is just some cheap rubber strap that I picked up, and originally I had this on the original Omega stainless steel bracelet, which I don't like anymore because it's not tapered. It feels kind of wonky. But this has the helium escape valve, and it's got crown guards, meaning that those protect the crown if you happen to bang it into walls or whatever. And that's what I do. I mean, these wristwatches, these dive watches, I wear in hot tubs, I wear in formal settings. You know, they take a lot of abuse. The bezel action, very nice. However, you'll notice this is kind of hard to grip even with gloves on. And it being a dive watch, that's something that kind of makes the, what doesn't kind of make, it makes the Omega SeaMaster, in my opinion, inferior to the Rolex and Tudor offerings that we're about to look at. Omega is a great wristwatch. Omega is something definitely to consider. And Omega SeaMaster 300M, arguably, probably on the, well, I mean on the dive watch front, definitely the most iconic Omega dive watch. But I would say the most iconic Omega watch overall is probably the Speedmaster, the man on the moon with the Hesalite dial. So if you're looking for Omega, definitely, I would definitely go with Omega SeaMaster 300M, or I would go with the man on the moon Hesalite crystal. And the Hesalite crystal is important because that is the most likely the most collectible Omega Speedmaster would be the one with the Hesalite crystal. Now keep in mind, that's not a swim or, you know, be too aggressive while wearing it wristwatch if you go with the Speedmaster. This right here, this right here, Rolex Submariner no date. And you don't have to say no date, that's implied. This is the Rolex Submariner. If it has a date, it's called Rolex Submariner date. This is arguably the most iconic wristwatch in the world. Even with gloves on, you can hear that very pleasing sound from the bezel. This has no date, which is a win because with no date, you've got dial symmetry. If you have a Submariner that has a date, you've got what's called a cyclops at the 3 o'clock position. Not only does the cyclops kill the symmetry on the dial, but the cyclops would also, it's actually attached to the sapphire. It collects junk and stuff. If you don't, I mean, I shower with my wristwatches. I mean, not recommended, but, well, I shower with my dive watches. I don't shower with my watches that lack water resistance. But yeah, this one has dial symmetry because it has no date. This would be, in my opinion, the Rolex that one would want. So if you're in the if you're undecided, Rolex, Tudor, Omega, if you're going Rolex, go Rolex Submariner. Don't think twice. And I mean, the bracelet is super comfortable. It's tapered. This particular reference, the 114060, which was the original ceramic reference for the Submariner, it has glide lock. So if you get fat or skinny on the wrist, you can adjust it without tools. This is the one, and this is, well, check out my separate video, the one and done Rolex. This right here is arguably not only just the one and done Rolex, this is arguably the most iconic wristwatch in the world. And you can wear it in a pool, you can wear it in a snooty board meeting, you can wear it in a snooty restaurant, you can wear it with a pair of flip-flops and a t-shirt, you can take a shower with it, whatever you want to do. I mean, be a boss. So there is the Rolex Submariner. And then we're going to look at Tudor. Tudor has a lot of references. Some of the Tudors from many years ago, in my opinion, were not the least bit desirable. They looked cheap. They just weren't neat. The thing about this is the Black Bay 58 in navy. This wristwatch has the oyster style bracelet. Very nice bezel action. Again, just like the Submariner, it's easy to grip even with gloves on. And especially if you're wearing it while you're swimming, you want something that has tactile grip. And, you know, this does it. Where the Tudor is different from the Submariner, although both, as you see here, I mean, cosmetically, especially from afar, both of these dive watches share the same DNA. Or not the same, but similar DNA. You can tell this is likely manufactured by the same company that manufactured that. And that's because both of these brands, Tudor and Rolex, are part of the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. Actually, Hans Wilsdorf, he wanted to provide customers with a less expensive version of Rolex, so he created Tudor. Now, what's happened recently, at the time of filming this video, in calendar year 2026, Rolex has gotten so expensive that most people can't even approach it. And I mean, I'm fortunate I got, Rolex when I was able to haggle for a discount in an authorized dealer while wearing a swimsuit. So those days, that ship has sailed. With that being said, now you've got Rolex's sister brand, Tudor, rising to fame. And just like Rolex, you've often got annual increases in price, maybe not necessarily across the range of all references of Tudor, but many of the references, there will likely be price increases. So if you get either of these brands, Rolex or Tudor, the possibility of price appreciation over time exists. So if you ever wanted to trade out or sell and get something different, maybe you just hate wristwatches, which I don't know how you do that if you bought one to begin with. Maybe you just don't like it. Maybe you don't wear it. These two brands, Rolex especially, but Tudor also with the new Tudor, because Tudor is no longer, Tudor used to be in Rolex's basement in Switzerland. Now Tudor has their own manufacturing facility. So basically what Tudor is doing now is what Rolex did in the past. This is an aluminum, or you may say aluminium bezel if you're from across the pond. The Submariner has a ceramic bezel. So when you're dealing with current reference Rolex, they're going to have ceramic bezels. Tudor, there are some Tudor references that have ceramic, but most of the Tudors you find are going to have aluminum. The value add of aluminum, it gives the wristwatch a more old school look. And also the aluminum bezel insert likely develops a pleasing patina over time, as you can see here in my Omega. See how the bezel is very lightly colored? A lot of collectors would crave that because they call it patina. So just like my Omega here, that I've had, well, probably for about 30 years, I guess, and I wore it everywhere, in hot tubs, oceans, and banged it into walls. I got scratches in the aluminum bezel. That is the disadvantage to aluminum bezel, is that it will scratch and it will discolor. But that's not a bad thing. A lot of people like the patina aspect. With the Submariner, the ceramic bezel is probably not going to fade. It's probably not going to crack. It's probably going to always look the same. And you may prefer that. But again, it's all personal preference. Looking at Rolex versus Omega versus Tudor from a purchase decision perspective, obviously Rolex, unless things change, is likely always going to be the best purchase, because with the Rolex, it'll probably always continue to appreciate in value. If you ever decide to sell or trade, you'll probably at least break even. Maybe you even make a profit. Who knows? I mean, it's an interesting look at historical pricing for the Rolex Submariner, for example. But with that being said, if you go with Omega, now Omega has a tendency to release an abundance of references. References just being a fancy wristwatch collector's term for models. So Omega kind of dilutes their brand to some degree because they release so many references and then so many subtle variations of each reference. Whereas Rolex is kind of cut and dry. They don't think outside the box much. They may release a slightly different version of an existing reference, but they're not too radical. That's where Tudor comes into play. Tudor is the brand that will experiment. Tudor is the brand that, they will try different things. They don't really care. Rolex is always going to be timeless. Tudor, they're going to experiment. Omega, again, a lot of different references. If you're going with Omega, stick with the core references. Stick with an Omega SeaMaster 300M like you're seeing here. Always buy it on the bracelet. Like I said, I've got it on some cheap aftermarket rubber strap. but always buy it on the bracelet, and then you can add whatever rubber strap or any type of strap that you may choose to add. The Omega, though, always stick with Omega SeaMaster 300M or Omega Speedmaster Man on the Moon, specifically Man on the Moon with Hesalite crystal, if you want the collectible reference. If you want the wear anywhere except water, because the Omega Speedmaster does not have screw down crowns, you can get what they call the sapphire sandwich. That's going to be more durable for daily wear without the water resistance. But the Hesalite crystal Speedmaster is the one that you would want for collectability, the Man on the Moon wristwatch. Rolex, pretty much across the range, you can't go wrong with Rolex. Most any Rolex reference is going to likely appreciate in value, but likely this that you see here, the Submariner, is likely always going to be the most iconic wristwatch in the world, and probably the best purchase decision if one is buying a Rolex. But again, with Rolex across the range, the purchase decision is somewhat safe. They will all likely continue to appreciate in value. Tudor, got to be careful. Tudor, the problem with Tudor, and now this is the Black Bay 58. I'm going to put these side by side. This is something that one would not notice within a video, but I'm going to point it out. See the case thickness here and there? This, being the Tudor Black Bay 58, this is acceptable case thickness, or someone may say the height on the wrist. However you say it, it's implying the same thing. You know, how big is the watch on the wrist? Submariner and Tudor Black Bay 58 both have acceptable case thickness, and obviously the Omega SeaMaster 300M reference that I have here does too. The problem with Tudor, and Tudor, the more recent Tudor references, they've got some really solid stuff. Tudor is kind of like what Rolex used to be, but Tudor also has a lot of what you call chunky monkeys, and those are cases that are very thick. So with Tudor, be careful. With Tudor, I would stick with the Black Bay 58. They have a GMT reference. The Black Bay 58, this is 39mm. Don't let the less than 40mm scare you if you're a numbers person. The Submariner is 40mm. The Tudor is 39. But both of these, for most people, obviously the Submariner is going to wear larger, but 39mm is not small. And this, I think the SeaMaster that I have here, I think it's either a 40 or a 41. I think it's 40, but all of these visually, I mean, obviously the Black Bay 58 is a little bit smaller physically, and part of the way that it wears visually smaller is also the Black Bay 58 does not have crown guards, whereas on the Rolex Submariner you've got crown guards, and then on the Omega SeaMaster 300M you have crown guards. And then different color dials have visual tricks. Now, this is blue, this is blue, this is black. But if one of these happen to be white, white often visually wears larger. On the same wristwatch, if it's a white dial versus a black, the black appears to be physically smaller, even though it's the exact same wristwatch. But at least at the time filming this, there is not a white Submariner dial. And at least at the time of filming this, there's not a white Black Bay 58 dial. But looking at these three, Tudor, Rolex, and Omega, if you're choosing among these, if you're going with Tudor, again, be very careful. I would stick with Black Bay 58. I feel that's the sweet spot. If you ever want to trade out of it, you're probably going to be in better shape if you go with some of the Tudor references that are too big and less desirable. And a lot of that less desirable is linked to the fact that they're too big, too case thick. Rolex across the range, you're going to be good. And Omega, if you stick with Omega SeaMaster 300M or Speedmaster, you're probably going to be okay. But again, Omega, they have somewhat diluted their brand with an abundance of references and variations of each reference. So be careful, stick with the classics. I would stick with Omega SeaMaster 300M like you see here. You cannot go wrong with that. You can't go wrong with any of these three. But these are my opinions. Rolex versus Omega versus Tudor. Share your opinions below. What do you think? I'm not the only wristwatch person in the world, and I definitely don't know as much as Archibald Chesterfield III, AC3. He is arguably the most knowledgeable wristwatch person in the entire universe. Subscribe, ring that bell, and check out all of my Timepieces for Tomorrow videos. Y'all have a good day. Hey y'all, Irix Guy here. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please be sure to subscribe to my channel, and when you do, ring that bell icon to be notified whenever I post another video. Thanks for your viewership, and y'all have a good day.